hello, I'm Lisa Armitage, and I am a curriculum advisor with the Office of the Pro-Vice Chancellor Learning Transformations, and I'm working for the School of Social Sciences and Psychology. This presentation is about some work that I've done into a first-year transition unit in the School of Social Sciences and Psychology, the Individual in Society. The unit coordinator is Dr. Tim Griffin, and I've been working with him in various aspects of improvements in this unit. This story is just about a little sub-project with helping to improve the quality of the feedback that students get in that unit, which is very important because it's a large first-year transition unit. Approximately 1,200 students enrolled every semester. It's had a very good track record of student success because of its academic literacy strategies that are embedded in the unit, which makes it a very effective transition core. And for that reason, in 2015, it was moved from spring session to autumn session. Just that slight move for commencing students in autumn meant that the unit need to be rethought. That little time lapse is quite crucial to students, and some new approaches were needed for those commences in 2015 in autumn. One of the hallmarks of the way that Tim Griffin works into this unit is that he takes advantage of any learning support that's available in the university at that time. Our structures of learning support always change, but he'll always hook into what's going, and I know that this tutorial team uses tailored resources that were developed 6 years ago from my colleagues in the old student learning unit. Another thing to note about this unit is that the tutorial team are very experienced, a very cohesive community of practice who've been working on this unit for many years, most of them, which made it actually more important to do this work with the feedback when assessments were changed, because they were very immersed in the old ways of doing things. So, in terms of tweaking this unit to better cater to commencers, there were slight changes made in assessment 1 in 2014, but in 2015 a major change was needed for these newer students, and it involved the students including a little reflective paragraph in their first assignment on their transition to university. They just had to talk about how they were approaching their learning, a very free, open paragraph. But what that meant was that the feedback had to be really good quality, because in the second assignment, they again followed up with a reflection on the feedback that they'd received on the first. So there was an imperative to make sure that the feedback was the best quality possible, but also so that there was consistency across the team. So my part as a curriculum advisor, as an outside person, was that I did a little analysis job, and I was interested to know whether the comment bank that the tutors were using for the old assignment was actually aligned to all the other materials, and this analysis was going to work in with developing a new comment bank for the new assignment. So I looked at the learning outcomes, the learning guide, the marking group, rubric, the current comment bank that the tutors were using, but also importantly, the students' complaints about their feedback from the previous year, where students had written to argue that they wanted a remark based on what had gone wrong with the criteria. So they had to refer to the criteria. Once I'd done that analysis, I worked iteratively with the assistant unit coordinator and the tutorial team, and this comment bank went back and forth in discussion with the tutors and the unit coordinator as it was developed. Finally, I presented my analysis at the marking meeting, And that marking meeting was before marking had started to integrate the new assignment. And I'm going to come back to Carless, who wrote in 2006 about assessment dialogues and the importance of that at that meeting. Because a comment bank is not the answer. It's not an answer in itself to good quality feedback. It is part of a bigger picture. So I analysed all this material against a set of criteria that I use myself for best practice feedback. And I haven't made this up. This is distilled from a whole bunch of literature. And you'll see here that it's written in a conversational tone. Big part of giving students feedback that encourages them is not to be giving them something that might look like a parking infringement notice. You know, we to include them as valued colleagues that we are guiding into a disciplined community rather than smacking them over the head. So, importantly, congruent language, which I analysed for, Feedforward, so students know what to do. That tone, which I analysed in that particular tutorial group, is very, very good. It was good quality feedback. Calibration, so that the comments and the marks are calibrated to the student's level that is specified in the rubric. And the last one, which is really important and a kind of hidden curriculum that we have in marking, and I did it as casual for many years, is that we have very tacit set ideas about what good academic writing looks like as individuals. Sometimes we kind of take that as divine law, and it's not. So, for example, I hear some tutors or lecturers say, you know, you must never use subheadings in an essay. Whereas I know that there are unit coordinators in this room that want students to use subheadings. So it's about understanding what our divine laws are and getting over them, basically. So with my analysis, against these best practice principles, what I found was that sometimes the language was incongruent between what the rubric asked, marking rubric asked for, and the comment bank. Now here, on the comment bank column, markers are giving really encouraging, well-meaning feedback, but they're using language that's getting mixed up with the descriptors. So, for example, some of the students' complaints were, well, you said my answer was good, why am I in the satisfactory cell of the rubric? So it's just about being careful that you're not confusing this language, very well intended. So this is where we come into calibration and veering off the marking rubric. Students were asked to give a summary of the main points, but I found that tutors were sometimes asking for a developed discussion or to discuss in a more analytical way, and it wasn't there. So what's really important about this is that this is a 1,200 first-year students, or mostly first-year students, and slippages like this could mean a student failing an assignment or failing that unit. So it's very important to be on track with the marking right criteria. So, Feedforward. There was often, and it's so hard to articulate Feedforward. It is not easy to be able to tell a student how to bridge that gap. We know tacitly how you might do it, but to actually articulate that is hard. And this student's really cranky. You know, well, how? They're asking. And in good feedback, the how will be articulated, and that's what we worked on in the comment bank, to actually discuss with tutors, well, how would you answer that well? How would you say that? What would that look like? Okay, so my overall impression was that sometimes students were expecting a very high level of sophistication, or quite a high level of sophistication in a first year unit that was unrealistic, and it wasn't what the unit coordinator expected necessarily. So I've got here critical analysis slippage. So many times in first year units, I see critical analysis in the marking rubric when it's not in the learning outcomes. And from my perspective, critical analysis in first year, you might be introducing it, but you wouldn't be assuring it. Okay. This is in my marking criteria talking about using the should have or should not. You should, you shouldn't. You should have used a definition. I saw that a lot in the marking comments, but it wasn't asked for in the rubric definitions. However, we know in academic writing that providing a definition for terms you use is just good practice. It's something that you do in academic writing. So rather than bashing the student over the head for not doing it, explain to them, this is a good academic practice. This is a way that you might get some more marks in the future. So misaligned feedback, just by changing the tone to an advisor rather than a basher, that feedback becomes feedforward. I was really interested in this when I saw this comment in the student analysis, or in the student complaints. So this student has said, I was asked to identify a list of a bunch of stuff, and I did it. I listed them. And that's what identifying is. And I've been marked down. Now, in everyday life, identifying is listing. It's you, 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 you. I'm not expected to give an explanation if I'm asked to identify certain people, but in academia, the practice is you don't identify or to give an example of anything without giving a reason why. So this student is using an everyday understanding of an academic term, and it's our job for transitioning students to guide them into that discourse community and explain to things how things change in a context rather than just expecting them to know. So it's about us examining our tacit understanding and making sure we're not assuming that others will know what we mean. Okay. The markers' comments were respectful and encouraging. But even so, sometimes, as I said, they were misguided. In the markers meeting, we broached this disparity in meaning making of the language in the rubric. I did a little exercise where I asked around the table what this particular sentence in the marking criteria meant. Summarises the main points but uneven and may have missed a key point. And I went round the table and I asked each marker, what do you think an uneven answer would look like? What does uneven mean? And every marker had a different interpretation, and they were all different than the unit coordinators. And people were quite shocked that there was such a disparity. So the job then is to discuss, okay, what does this group mean by uneven? And this is where I say the comment bank doesn't account for everything, it won't solve everything. And just as we moderate marks in a markers meeting, we need to moderate the meaning of the language in our learning materials, because meaning doesn't reside in words alone, it's negotiated socially. So Carless, 2006, which a writer that informed this analysis and work, stresses the fact that it doesn't matter how clear and consistent you make your written learning materials, students must handle them in dialogue with their teachers in order to understand what they actually mean. And this project goes a little step further to say it's not just students who need to do that sharing of meanings, it's the teaching team itself. So the new comment bank, we had content domains where the tutors tailored the comments to that assignment with a stem that they could choose from. Writing domains that I wrote for the particular micro skills that were in that assessment. And there was best practice advice to markers, for example, not to waste time correcting grammar. and giving some feed-forward tips on links that they could instead send their students to look at their grammar. So it was really important. The tutors were not forced to use the comment bank. They're experienced tutors with their own practices. There was mixed reaction, but they all used it somehow. I think what was more important were the discussions that happened around the comment bank. So, just to wrap up, this, as I said, is only one part of a bigger continuous improvement project in this unit. This year, the assessment was changed completely, and students were asked to use the theoretical framework that they were learning about to analyse their own experience of coming to university, and it worked really well. And that transition pedagogy is you use the students' everyday experience, like the fellow with the identifying problem, you use that as a leverage into new knowledge. So students were able to analyse their own experience rather than an abstract topic. Oh, just to go back there, the impact, that's quite significant, a 10% reduce in the fail rate, and an increasing confidence of those students for assessment 2, where they didn't ask the volume of questions that they had the year before. There are other indicators, but that's I think, pretty good.
Thank you, Lisa. I think, yeah. It's very interesting that, language and tone plays such a big part in giving quality feedback and feed forward to students. Does anyone have any questions for Lisa?
So as part of that, do you think using exemplars would help students as well pass the test?
Definitely, that's another prong, but one of the problems with the use of exemplars is there's usually a couple of HDs banged up on views with no discussion, no handling. What's the most powerful students is you give them a range of grades, exemplars, and you get the students to judge them using the criteria themselves.
So they kind of do like a key mark almost.
Yep, in class, and that's the assessment dialogue that Carless is talking about.
Do you have any other questions for Lisa? If you do, we can catch you after the session.
And Tim Griffin, he's quite evangelical about first-year transition pedagogy, so I'm sure he would be open to discussing his innovation.